Today I want to talk about an emergency fund and whether or not it's right for you. A lot of times we hear the classic advice just to keep something like cash in a liquid account that we can use for the next 3 to 6 months in case any emergencies come up. Things like medical bills, car problems, issues with your home, really any problem that you can consider an emergency. But I've been sort of thinking about this recently, and I think it's something you should also question. I think generally speaking, it's always good to, be skeptical about the common advice, the common wisdom that we hear, because we need to question whether or not it's applicable to ourselves. And I think a lot of this, conversation about an emergency fund may not be applicable to everyone. For example, there are some people that like to take on more risk. There are maybe some people that have more cash flow. So let's dive a little bit into that and figure out whether or not an emergency fund is right for us. And I'm sort of making this video to spark a little bit of a debate, a little bit of a conversation. I want people to join on the conversation and talk a little bit about what do they think about emergency funds. Do you have an emergency fund and it's something that you have planned for a long period of time or not? So let's get right into it. So what is the problem with having an emergency cost? Well, if you really think about it, the point of an emergency fund is just to have money sitting there. You can think of someone on the extreme side of this that might just have money sitting under their mattress in their bed. It's extremely safe. It's very liquid. You can get it immediately, but it's not doing anything for you, okay? There's a little bit of a opportunity cost associated here. Let's say you have your money underneath your mattress, it's really not growing at all. You can maybe take it to the next step and have your money in a high yield savings account where I think right now the rates might be around 4%, but I think historically they've sort of varied. Let's say the range maybe being from anywhere from like 3 to 4 to 5 plus in some different accounts. I know there's a lot of different providers out there that'll have higher interest rates with a couple of different, let's say, features that you need to qualify before you can actually sign up for these accounts. But there's a little bit of variety there. And then on the extreme side of things, you don't put anything in an emergency fund and you have everything invested, because let's say historically you can get a return on your investment anywhere from like 8 to 12% over the last 30 to 40 years. This is what the historical data shows. Of course, you never want to base your future decisions or future plans based on historical data, but frankly, that's just sort of the way it's been in recent years. So there's that opportunity cost, and your money is just sitting there, which can lead to a big problem, right? And some people, frankly, just don't need it. Some people have a very high income and they have strong cash flow, right? If you're making a certain amount of income that you can sort of act as your own emergency fund, maybe you don't really want money just sitting there, because every single dollar you invest into an emergency fund is a dollar that you can have working for you. And especially talking to people that are younger, I think a lot of the common advice is if you're young, especially you're just graduated from college, you're about to start your life, let's say, start stacking up that emergency fund, because maybe your life is sort of unstable right now. You're still trying to figure things out. You're just starting your career, so you don't really know what's going to happen. Start pouring into that emergency fund. But I feel like the opposite maybe should be said, where because you're young, you have so much time on your side and you can probably afford to live a little bit below your means. Typically, you have no major responsibilities. You don't have kids. Maybe, you're single, you're renting out an apartment, or you're just living way below your means. You can invest every dollar, and that dollar will compound to something much, much greater by the time you retire. Even if you're planning on retiring earlier, let's say you start working at 22, you plan on retiring at 35, that's still 13 years on your side that you have, that money is going to work really hard for you. Okay, some people also have other types of safety nets. They have things like credit, like a credit card or a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, which, you might be hearing these things and thinking like, Rafael, man, that's really not great advice. But the thing is, you have to be smart how you use these tools, right? I don't like to say a blanket statement like never use credit cards because they're bad. Maybe never, take out a line of credit against your home because it's bad. I think you can use these tools, and these tools exist for people that are responsible with their money, right? Obviously, yeah, with the HELOC, you're putting your home against the line. But if you can pay it back and you're responsible and you're confident in your ability to do so, then I don't see an issue with it. Frankly, I don't know too much about a HELOC. I've never done it myself. This is just what I know from having read on it. Maybe someone in the comments can, give me more information. I'd be happy to learn. And that's sort of the point of this channel, for me to learn and be here alongside you, telling you what I learn about finances. Similarly, with a credit card, I think a credit card can be a great tool if you use it responsibly. Are you paying with your credit card? Are you getting whatever rewards you're getting from it? Are you using those rewards? Most importantly, are you paying the credit card balance in full during every month's billing cycle? That's the most important thing when it comes to a credit card. So I don't see an issue if you can use these things responsibly. You also have other things like family. Depending on your situation, some people, and maybe some people it's a cultural thing, a lot of times you can depend on family, right? So you don't necessarily need to put all your money into an emergency fund. You might think to yourself, well, maybe right now, especially for the young people, I'm living at home, I have extra money that I can use. I think especially if you're living at home, now we're seeing rates of millennials, especially older generations, that are still living at home with their parents. They might see it as a bad thing, but I want you to flip the script and think of it as actually a very powerful tool. Because first of all, I think the most important thing, you're spending valuable time with your family, and if you have a great relationship with them, it's time that you'll never get back. And I do think when you get older, you'll probably appreciate the time you had with them, and it's a phenomenal thing to even be able to share all those moments with them. But two, you have so much savings potential. Okay, I knew someone that when I worked with them, they lived with their parents for like 5 or 6 years while everyone else was having their own apartments. But I remember talking to them, and the amount of money that they were able to save was incredible because they weren't paying a rent. Some families won't even allow their kids to pay rent and just say, just live here so you can focus on the next big thing. Maybe these people want to start a family, they want to buy a house, and if you're living at home, your ability to do that just ramps up so much more. So some people have this safety net, right? For example, my wife and I are on very different spectrums of the risk tolerance. She's very risk averse, I'm very risk tolerant, right? So she does not like taking on any risk. She does have an emergency account, a phenomenal emergency account at that. And I'd be lying if I say that I don't sort of lean on her a little bit for that. I always like to tell her that, we have a portfolio of sorts, so I am the one taking more risk for the family, and she is the one with the safety net, giving us a little bit of that cushion in case things go wrong. And we like it this way, and this is how it's worked out for us. So, of course, something you have to discuss with your family, but we all live in different situations. We have family that maybe we can lean on to help us through these difficult times. And then, of course, some of us have assets, right? You might have money invested elsewhere that you can use instead of having an emergency fund. If you're very risk tolerant, you might be just putting all your money into investments, and then of course it's not as liquid as cash, but maybe you're okay with giving that little grace period. Even if it takes 3 days to pull out, if something really terrible happens, again, you have your credit cards, you have your family, you have other assets like investments to help you out. These are just some things you need to be aware of. And again, it all boils down to your risk tolerance. Are you someone like my wife that is very risk averse? Do you feel like I need to have an emergency fund at all times? It's just good for my mental health. It decreases my stress. I'm able to sleep better. Life is just better with it. Then by all means do it. Obviously, not everyone's in the same financial situation. If you're someone like me, on the other hand, that's more risk averse, to be honest, like sort of living on the edge with my money. I mean, in my checking account, I might have maybe like $1,000 at any given time, which is a very, very low amount for someone that's that's the only money that I can pull out very quickly to be able to handle something if something goes wrong. But I just sort of like living like that. And yeah, there are some days where I'm like, I'm waiting for that next paycheck to come through. And that's just how I sort of roll, because all my other money I like to use in my investments or to put elsewhere where I can have that money grow for me. So I have a very low amount of my checkings so I can use that money elsewhere. But again, it just comes down to your risk tolerance. So what are the risks of, let's say, not putting it in an emergency fund, right? Not leaving it in something like a high yield savings account, not leaving it under your mattress, let's say? Well, there could be a market downturn. Imagine the person that is maybe saving for a house or just putting all their money into investments, and maybe they're approaching retirement age. I'll get to this in another video, but typically the older you get, the more safe you want to be, right? You maybe want to move your money into something like bonds, or maybe you want to start investing more in dividends so you have a steady stream of income coming every single month during your retirement age. What happens if you put all your money into these aggressive stocks, and then by the time you're retired, there's a crazy market downturn? Something like the 2008 crash or something like COVID, and all of a sudden you lose a ton of money. That is a risk you have to be willing to take. But of course, there's always the upside. Well, what if things actually work better for me? Okay, if you zoom out, I want you to do something for me. Instead of thinking of the downturns and you think to yourself, oh, investing is scary, what if I lose my money? I want you to do something like take the S&P 500 index and zoom out all the way. And if you see, I'll put it up on the screen here. If you see, there has been a general positive trend, right? Since the lifetime of the fund, things generally go up. Of course, you see these spikes, these downturns, but that's only small transient moments, right? The big picture is the market continues to go up. It has continued to go up. So generally speaking, if you're in this for the long term, your money will grow. But again, you have to adopt that long-term mindset. So that's one risk of skipping this and, not having anything in the emergency fund, is the risk of the market going down. Also, there's liquidity delays. You can't immediately sell your investments. It's not like you can just pocket the cash immediately, right? If you need something right away and don't have something like, again, the money under your mattress or something like in a checking account, maybe even something like a high yield savings account, you might have to wait a couple of days before that money is ready. And depending on what is going on in your life, that might not be acceptable. So you really have to ask yourself, well, okay, for example, we all know like how we live our lives, right? Are we the type of people that we have these emergencies come up often, right? Are we the type of people that are generally stable? Obviously, sometimes the emergency is truly random. There is no way that we can plan for it, so we really don't know. But all in all, you generally have a sense of your life if you're stable or if you're someone that's sort of in a rocky moment right now. Like, let's say you just took on a massive life change. Let's say you just moved to a brand new state. You took on a brand new job. A lot of these massive movements might cause a lot of volatility in the short term. So maybe during these times you might want to play it safe and put things in an emergency fund, right? But if you've been stable for a while, let's say someone like me, I've been in the same job for 8 years, I generally have an idea of how my day will go, how my lifestyle is, and I know that things are pretty stable. So I can sort of play it a little more risky and put my money more into investments, and I'm okay with there being a little bit of a liquidity delay. I don't mind if it takes time for me to get that money because I have a checking account. I have family to lean on. I have other assets, right? Credit cards, HELOC if I need to, so on and so forth. Things I want you to think about. And finally, of course, there's the stress factor. I cannot stress the stress factor enough because that really plays a lot into how you deal with money. If you're someone that gets very stressed, and again, you just sleep better knowing that you have money readily available, then by all means do it, because you don't want to change your life so much that you're not happy. You need to do things in a way that continue your happiness, that help you keep your discipline, help you continue moving the needle forward. And if you're messing around so much with your money that you have to make massive sacrifices and you're just not feeling good about it, then I don't think it's worth it at the end of the day. So all this to say is really assess the type of person you are and then just go from there. Now, what if you have an emergency fund right now and you're thinking, he's right. Maybe I can sort of play it in the middle. Is there any sort of middle ground that I can do here that would allow for me to have a little bit of an emergency fund, but maybe not everything put into one big basket, just like money under the mattress? And the good news is there is. Now, this is something I just learned about recently, which is pretty cool, and I'd be more than happy to dive deeper into this in another video. Let me know if you'd like for me to go into some of these things more deeply, but here is what that mix can look like, okay? We can do something like a tiered system. So you don't have to have all your money in cash. You can do something like you can have a portion of that in cash, right? You have a little bit of that in cash. Maybe it's a small amount, let's say $1,000 to $2,000. You don't have to have 3 to 6 months of savings or 12 months of savings, right? You can just have $1,000 to $2,000. Another portion of that can be something like semi-liquid assets. Now, this is the cool thing about this channel, okay? Again, I want to stress that I'm really just learning about these things alongside everyone, and I'm trying to teach you, if anything, show you the journey that I'm going through, and hopefully spark some debate, some conversations, so we can all learn together, okay? You can do things like have treasury bills. Treasury bills are something I've always heard about, but these are some things that you can do. Treasury bills, okay? You can do things like have your money in a money market fund. You can do things like CDs, right? You can do things like high yield savings account. These are these semi-liquid assets, so you can also put some money into that you might get better yields on, better rates on, but your money doesn't have to be so locked up, right? Not so locked up, let's say, as investments, but not so liquid as in cash. There's a little bit of a spectrum here. So we have our cash, very liquid. We have semi-liquid, so high yield savings account, CDs, money market funds, treasury bills. And then finally, of course, we have some investments. There's two birds that are just going crazy right on my windshield. That was wild. Investments, right? You can have some of your money in investment accounts, and that's going to also allow you to have some of that money to grow. So the homework for today, all right, you've been watching my videos for a while now. If you have, that's awesome. Always glad to have you. The homework for today is to assess your current financial situation, and I want you to decide for yourself, are you someone that is, comfortable with your current situation? Do you feel like maybe you have a lot of money sitting in an emergency fund and you want to see how you can have a little bit of that money work for you? Maybe let's say you have, I don't know, $10,000. Maybe you say, well, do I really need $10,000 in my emergency fund? Maybe I can pull out $5,000, leave $5,000 strictly in cash, maybe invest $2,000 of that, and then the other $3,000 I'll put into things like treasury bills and CDs and so on and so forth. That way you have a little bit of a mix, and then just keep going from there. The point of investing and the point of finance is that for every single life stage, and I would even wager every single day, you should assess. Some people don't like to hear this, right? They're thinking, I don't want to be so active on it. This is too much. I don't want to have to constantly be thinking about my finances, but it's a healthy thing to do. Every day, every week, every month, assess where you are and decide for yourself, can I move these percentages a little bit more? Can I go more into investments? Because you might find that right now you have $10,000 in emergency fund, but maybe if you go down to 5,000, you might think, hey, I don't need any more than this, and I could have been making money on those $5,000 for a long time. But because I heard from some person, hey, you need 3 to 6 months of savings, 12 months of savings, I decided to put everything in there. Okay, the point of the finances and the way to grow is to just keep reassessing where you are, keep figuring out what works best for you and make the changes. So that's really all I have to say today. I want to know exactly how people feel about emergency funds. I feel like it could be a little bit of a sensitive topic because everyone's in a different point of their lives. Sometimes at some points you're, let's say, at a low financial point and you need all the money that you can get, so you really can't risk, having things in investments, and you're sort of maybe living paycheck to paycheck, or an emergency happen where you need the money to be very liquid, and in that case, and by all means, go full emergency fund. But other times in your life, there are things that get better. And during the good times is when I want you to reassess and think when you can start putting money in an investment, semi-liquid assets, so on and so forth. So that's the video for today. I'm glad that I was able to do a little bit of a commute here, because I also like driving while I'm doing these videos. I think it sort of adds to the ambiance, and really at the end of the day, I want you to feel like you're just driving with me and you're learning alongside me and you're on this journey for me, because I'll tell you, it is a journey. There's so much to learn, and I feel like I have so much to talk about. So with all that being said, thank you all for watching. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this topic, and I will see you all next time. Later.